Hello, welcome everybody to another installment of LA Guitar Hang. And today I have a great guitar player and a great guy, Perry Smith, joining me today from Brooklyn, New York. How's it going, dude?
It's going well. Glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, you're my first, I can't say non-LA guy because you're in New York now, but you're my first guy that doesn't live here at this current time. But I wanted to include you because you're a California guy and you were in LA for a long time and you're in a group that's related to LA, and anybody who is part of the LA scene for sure knows who you are. So I figure, what the hell?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, man, the LA scene means a lot to me. I
I-
spent 8 great years there, and
uh,
the guitar community especially is something very unique.
yeah, man, a lot of great players and a lot of great, just a lot. It's a great hang and a lot of good brotherhood vibes. And I talked about that with your buddy John Story. We talked about how the scene is and how everyone's so supportive of each other and everything.
Yeah, I mean, that really benefited John and I. I mean, everybody.
Yeah,
But I remember since John and I kind of came up together in so many ways, we've discussed that a lot. Places like Guitar Night and, just pretty much any guitar player you would meet who was older than you kind of had a pretty encouraging way about them.
yeah,
And that meant a lot to guys like John Story and I, who we were 18, 17, 18, 19 coming up, trying to figure out the scene, sitting in a few places here and there. And it's not quite the same vibe out in New York,
I heard
but
that.
there are
Okay,
a lot of advantages out here as well. So you kind
sure.
of just sort of take the good and the bad with each place.
Yeah. Well, that's another reason to bring you in is you're the last remaining member of the New West Guitar Group that I haven't interviewed yet. I've already done Will and John, so we're glad to get you
Nice.
in here as well.
Yes, man. NWGG. It's like my it's like my baby, in so
Yeah,
many
man.
ways. Started that group really, I guess you could say 2004, but we really kind of think of it more like 2005 when we had some of our first initial gigs. It was New West Guitar Quartet back then, which has
Right,
always been a confusing thing for the people that know about us because a lot of people, when they first hear about you, that's how they remember you, you
right.
know? So people kind of heard about us as a quartet. So even still today, I'll come across guitar players that are like, "Oh yeah, how's the quartet?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's been a trio for about 8 years, but yeah, thanks. We're doing good."
Who was in the original? Now, you guys were all USC students originally, right? That's how it got
Yeah,
started. And who were the other
yeah.
two original guys?
The other two original guys, obviously John Story and myself, and the other two guys, tremendous guitar players. Matt Roberts, who goes
Hmm.
by Matt Hayes now,
Hmm.
and Brady Cohan. Both of those guys are still based in LA. They kind of were trending out of the jazz world, with the kind of gigs they were getting when they were starting to kind of get into the professional scene in LA. And so I
Hmm.
think naturally they were kind of pulled in some different directions than John Story and I. So we were able to replace them initially with a guitarist named Jeff Stein, who's also a really great guitar player. And he
That's
was
who
in the
I saw
group.
you guys with once a long time ago.
Yeah, so he sort of took over for Brady after we became a trio. And Jeff, tremendous player, great tone on his instrument. And that's when we kind of started to transition to playing more like covers of pop tunes and things like that to try to widen our audience. And it worked, it was great. We felt like after doing originals for so many years that we were in a good place to approach some of the pop covers and things. We could kind of blend them into the sound that we had already established as a group. And Jeff, the music community is just not for everybody. The music life is just not for everybody. And
I
Jeff
can imagine
Stein's
that.
his path in life took him to law school. So we were looking for another third member at that point. And fortunately, John Story said, "Hey, how about this young kid in Long Beach? His name's Will Braun." And that's when Will joined the group. And yeah, he's been a tremendous addition.
Yeah, you guys sound so great together. Speaking of Jeff Stein, I was just watching your earlier today your version of Wichita Lineman, the video guys that you
Yeah.
guys made. That was a great arrangement of that tune, man.
Yeah. that's all story, you know, like John has that knack for just like coming up with some pop hits that you wouldn't think about that would be
Hmm.
decent for our group to cover,
Yeah.
and then they eventually turn into something that really kind of resonates with our audience. He also came up with the "Everybody Wants to Rule the World" idea, and
Hmm.
so between that and Wichita Lineman, he's made a lot of the baby boomers in our audience very happy.
That's good marketing.
It is. It is. And you know, we sort of found ourselves in that circuit of like performing arts centers and theaters and like, you know, certain jazz clubs. And that's kind of the market. Those are sort of the people that, you know, kind of regularly go to those places of a certain age group. And
Yeah.
we found that covering these tunes, they're amazing songs, you know,
Yeah.
tunes from the 80s, 70s, things that kind of, you know, harken back to maybe the teenage years for some of these people that were at our shows. We found that those tunes are really deep and they really work, you know. And
Yeah.
Wichita was fun. It's a great arrangement. And I remember that video shoot. Were you watching the video
Mhm.
online, like the video on YouTube or something? Yeah,
Yeah, it came from the
with Jeff.
sky and then it
Yeah.
came down. That must have been a drone or something or whatever. The camera.
Yeah, man, we had this connection with this guy who's the head of the Society of Camera Operators.
Uh-huh.
John knew him because he like played a gig for them or something
Uh-huh.
and befriended this guy, and he became a fan of the group, and he was just like, "Hey, whenever I've got some free time, I'll hook you guys up and we'll do these like, you know, fairly significant budget video shoots, you know."
Yeah.
And like now you would never do that. You would just fly a drone up and bring it down. But no, they had like a crane like attached to a whole
Really?
thing, like a 50-foot crane that was coming down. We were in some studio lot. We thought we were like really having a good old time.
Well, that yeah, it came out really good, and like I enjoy your cover of "In Your Eyes," the Peter Gabriel tune, and "King of Pain."
Yeah,
Yeah, man,
yeah,
and to me, like as jazz musicians, we need to do more stuff like that anyway, because all the guys that we worship, Charlie Parker and Sonny Rollins, all those guys, they were doing pop tunes of their era or maybe their childhood, and we need to keep doing that at our age. You know how like Brad Meldau does Nick Drake and Radiohead, and a lot of people do Beatles, and I think that's something that we all need to do more of. I mean, obviously, the old standards are timeless and we'll play them forever, but there's so many great current songs, or maybe from the last 30 years or whatever, that we can include into the repertoire, and it'd be well worth it.
I agree. It doesn't mean that we lose sight of the music
Yeah.
from the tradition and like the standards and all that. It doesn't mean that we lose sight of those tunes. It just means that we kind of try to keep evolving jazz, you know.
Yeah.
I think
Just
that's
add
sort
to
of the
it.
idea. And exactly. And
Mhm.
I mean, as far as New West Guitar Group is concerned, for a lot of years, we were really adamantly about original music and we sort
Mhm.
of resisted that. And we kind of were in this sort of vacuum of original songs. And that was good to establish the sound. But then when we kind of, you know, started to add some pop covers, we felt like it also expanded our audience. And I found the same thing with some of my own groups out here in New York. I have a organ trio called No Biggity, and
Mhm.
we cover pop tunes from the 90s, like everything from like R&B, hip hop, rock, like whatever. I
That's
play like
cool,
a
man.
335 and I just play all the melodies on guitar and then we just kind of jam on it, you know. And
Yeah.
that's another audience that I get to experience out here in New York in addition to playing at places like Bar Next Door, 55, Smalls, these kinds of places,
Yeah.
where the audience is much more expecting like original or swinging jazz.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, what part of Brooklyn do you live in?
Now I live in a place called Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is sort of South Brooklyn.
Okay.
You get like below Park Slope, below Sunset Park, and then you're into Bay Ridge. It's sort of the last neighborhood in Brooklyn before you hit the Verrazano Bridge, which takes you over to Staten Island.
Okay.
So it's a cool place. There's a lot of good musicians down here. It's a little bit more affordable, and you're about 40 minutes away from the West Village, so it's not too bad, you know.
I heard, because I haven't I lived very briefly in New York, and I want to talk about that. But I haven't been back in a few years, especially with COVID now, but I've heard that Brooklyn is kind of taking all the artists are moving into Brooklyn, and that's where most of the stuff is happening anyway right now, right? Is that somewhat true or?
Exact. That's definitely true. Yeah. I'd say 75%, maybe 80% of the musicians I play with are based in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
And I used to have a weekly gig in Brooklyn for 5 years. So there's definitely like some good sessions and performance areas in Brooklyn. This is all pre-COVID. Now all this stuff is kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
But no, Brooklyn is a incredible place. It's an incredibly artistic place. It's complex. You know, you have the confluence of a lot of different kinds of people, and that has a lot of positive elements. That has a lot of challenging elements too. But overall, I think the reason that so many jazz musicians feel comfortable here is just because people celebrate music, you know, and they celebrate the art here. And there's a sense of like that bohemian spirit still that used to exist more in Manhattan that's not really in Manhattan anymore. That
Manhattan
stuff
has
is maybe
changed so
more,
much, right? Hasn't it?
yeah, I mean, there's still elements of that for sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, those elements are found more in places like, you know, Brooklyn, Queens, certainly up in the Bronx and Harlem still. So it just kind of depends on where you are. I mean, there is a lot of places in Brooklyn that are becoming very elite as well. That's just sort of the way New York is trending. And
Yeah.
in those places, you don't find too many musicians. So
Yeah.
musicians tend to kind of keep to the places where they feel like the art is valued.
Well, when I was there, I was in Park Slope, and I think now Park Slope might be one of those places you're talking about that like it's becoming like really rich and that kind of thing.
It, it is, yeah, but there's still a lot of musicians that live there. In fact, during the pandemic, some guys that were playing out in an area called Grand Army Plaza, which you might remember, which is in Brooklyn
Mhm.
near Park Slope, they were playing there every day, and they developed like a bit of a scene and a bit of a following out there. So people in Park Slope definitely still love good music. Some of
I
the
loved it
venues just got
there.
priced out. That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a
I
great
was
neighborhood.
there in the mid 90s, and but I only lasted a summer. I think I hold the world record for shortest stay in New York. You know, I gave up on it pretty quickly. I look back, I'm like, man, I should have gave it at least a couple years, but you know, I love New York, but I didn't necessarily. I'm the kind of guy like I figure out if something's going to work for me pretty quickly, and if I don't like something, I just cut the cable really quick. Maybe sometimes too quick, you know. But I
I
love
get
New York.
that, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
I
it was different. It was so different for me growing up in South Florida and like it's a long, long story, but basically I didn't go there with enough money and I ran out of money and all I did is work and I never played music. So like I was like, I gotta get out of here. But you know, if you go there it with money and with contacts and you can, you know, it's a better situation. But it was a long time ago. I've been back to New York several times because I love New York. I love visiting. I always have the best time ever. And I'm dying to go back, but I'm gonna wait a little bit, of course, you know.
y yeah, that might be a good idea these days. It'll come back. You know, I'm dying to get back to LA too, you know? Like I definitely miss the hang there in a lot of ways. Um, I feel what you're saying though about New York. It is a financially difficult place,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things that really kind of struck me when I moved from LA to New York. There's so many more musicians in New York,
Mhm.
right, than LA, and you experience the jazz scene and you see all these other musicians around compared to a place like Los Angeles. And my first thought was like, how are all these guys making a living? Like, what's going on? Like, where are all the gigs? You know?
Yeah.
And the reality is that a lot of them aren't. You know, they're either independently wealthy or they have another gig or a part-time job. But so many people are participating, whereas in LA, at least the years I was there, I never felt like that. I felt like you quickly met everybody in the scene, and you could kind of determine that most people were working enough, that
Yeah.
there were a lot of gigs for people. And that's one of the things I really liked about LA, which is why I'm glad that I started my career there, because at least back then, this would have been maybe 2000, 3, 4 when I started playing gigs up until about 2009. I felt like, a guitar player at my level could get enough work. Like I could get restaurant gigs, and I could get gigs at hotels and gigs with singers, and I could get club dates for myself, and little regional tours, and I could get teaching jobs and all that. I could do all that while I was still in college and soon after. And a lot of my friends out in New York, colleagues of mine, they were struggling to get any kind of gig, and they
Yeah.
might be crushing on their instrument.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I would recommend to people, think about LA, if you're starting out as a guitar player or a jazz musician, or you just want to work more in general, like think about LA. I don't know what it's like now, especially pandemic wise,
Oh,
but
it's
maybe you'd
dead
agree
now.
with me yeah, maybe you'd agree with me that back then during those years I was referencing, there it seemed to be enough work because there was like not as many musicians or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been any big city. I mean, even places like Austin are like this now, where it's like there's more musicians than gigs, obviously. But man, before the pandemic, I had the best 3 or 4 years I've ever had. I was gigging more than I ever had. I was teaching more than I ever had, and I was having a blast. There was tons of
That's
live
awesome.
music going on. I mean, the Blue Whale was going on, and the Blue Whale became a bastion of almost of New York musicians. I felt like every week a New York group was there, and I was like, oh, this is like living in New York. Chris Potter's this
There
week,
you,
and so is next week, and it's like this is great. So
there you go. I mean, that can also be controversial. I know some LA guys were like, "There's too many New York guys playing here now."
I've heard that
I was like,
too.
"I get
I
that."
know.
I was like, "I get that." I mean, I guess I was one of them, but I have roots in LA too, so I mean, I knew June before that place was what it
Yeah,
became. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's okay though. It's okay to have a spot like that in LA that brings in that kind of talent. I mean, when I was living in town, it was the Jazz Bakery. That was the vibe there.
Right.
Was that you'd get a lot of international touring jazz acts. So
Yeah.
I think it's good for the scene to have something like that.
I loved it, man. I mean, I didn't feel like the New York players were taking over. It wasn't like they were like two or three every week. I mean, it was like maybe, I don't know, two or three times a month. It felt like. I could be wrong, but it felt like it was mostly local musicians, and then we have Sam First, which just got kind of was getting going, and I don't know if any of these places are going to be around after I don't know. I mean, who the hell knows? But we'll see what happens. It felt like both places were doing pretty well. I mean, every time I went in there, I mean, it was a good amount of people, so it seemed like the scene was pretty healthy at the time.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
now I've heard because I get emails from the guy at Smalls. I heard that Smalls was doing some shows, being careful and having masks and all that. Was that true, or some of the
Yes.
places?
Yes. So Smalls out here, they've definitely tried to keep it going. I haven't been by to a show there. I used to go a lot pre-pandemic and used to play there with my band a couple times and with other people. Um, it seemed kind of risky, to be honest, to go down in like a basement in the middle of a pandemic with
Yeah,
people. And
yeah, yeah,
um, I've definitely kept my online support going for them though,
yeah.
because I chip in for the Smalls Live thing each month just to kind of help Spike out, because man, they have real expensive rent down there. So he's trying to keep it going however he can. Now they're doing shows that are sponsored by people. So like if you can get like a wealthy donor or somebody to kind of throw down some money, he'll be able to book you and present you and everything like that. So he's doing everything he can, and you know I just hope that it kind of hangs in there because I think we're gonna be in this for a little longer.
Well, this new stimulus bill supposedly has money for concert venues. Now, I don't know if that's going to include jazz clubs. It might only be theaters. I don't know, but that's encouraging news, I think.
Yeah, well, it's the small venues that really need the help,
Yeah,
you
that's the
know?
problem, I know. Like the Vanguard, I mean, how could the world not have the Vanguard? I mean, that's like a religious institution for jazz.
You're absolutely right, man. You're absolutely right, and I would think in New York that somebody would save the Vanguard, you know, if it came to it. There's, like, enough people with enough money out here,
There's
somebody would be
gotta
able to
be.
do that.
That's
Yeah.
the thing, like, in LA, they were, like, talking about, "Oh, the Troubadour might go under," and I'm like, "How could the Troubadour go under?" I mean, that's where Elton John was discovered. That's where countless folk and rock bands have played. I mean, some of these rock stars gotta cough up some bread for this place. I mean, a couple
I
100 grand here, a couple 100 grand there, that could save the place.
Yeah, I agree. You know, maybe the LA guitar community can convince, like, Kevin Bacon, the great guitar lover, and I'm sure he's a bazillionaire, you know, it probably
Yeah.
would be a little tax write-off for him, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, all the people that got discovered there, I mean, it's countless. Jackson Brown and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and it just goes on and on and on. All those people, if they just chip in some money, they could easily save the place.
Yeah. Wow, the
You know?
Troubadour. Yeah, I remember that spot was right on Santa Monica Boulevard and is it, like, Vine or something like what is that?
Yeah, it's like West Hollywood. Yeah.
West Hollywood, right. I remember driving by it a bunch. Yeah, it's still so funny, like, coming up in LA, I still have that, like, LA driving map in my head, you know, because
Yeah.
this was before, like, you had your Google Maps up on your phone and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and, like, I remember talking to so many musicians, we would all drive all over the place, and that was always a common thing. It's like, "How do you go from here to here? Do you have, like, a sniper route with streets that you can get from, like, you know, the valley down to Culver City?"
Yeah, because you want to avoid the traffic,
Yeah.
and I've discovered a few of those, like, because I live in Orange County, and I have my usual routes to Hollywood, but now my phone will have me go to like La Cienega, and that's like a
Yeah.
great straight shot from the 405 right into Hollywood, which you wouldn't
Oh,
even
yeah.
know that.
I used to live off of La Cienega. We're pretty close to it. I was on, like, Venice and Cattaraugus, Culver
Uh-huh.
City, like, a block away from the old jazz bakery. I had a place there,
Oh
and it was
man,
sick, man,
I
because so
love
many
the bakery. Miss it.
Yeah. So many people would come through, and we could have hangs and sessions at my place, and, like, it was above a taco shop, so it was, like it was the best of times and the worst of times.
So when did you move out to New York again?
2009. Yeah,
2009. Okay, yeah. So wow.
in the
So
fall.
it's been a long. You've been there a long time.
Yeah, 11 years, and, yeah, it's been a great move for me.
Yeah.
You know, I when I moved, I had a graduate teaching assistantship with NYU, so I had this opportunity for 2 years to kinda be there and have money and have, like, purpose and gain some paper and, like, study with some people, and it was great, but it also felt like kinda like a ticking time bomb of, like, "Okay, you got 2 years to, like, then what are you gonna do?"
You gotta get
Because
established.
Yeah, because you know, LA, I felt like I had a more gradual build into stuff, and it was like I was solid there. But that's
Mhm,
part of the reason that I left was I felt even after just 4 years, I felt, I can be a little complacent here in Los Angeles. Like,
mhm.
I can kind of just, like, ride this thing at this level, you know?
Yeah.
But I knew that there was something more for me that I wanted to experience. So New York was a little bit more hardcore that way, but yeah, I moved in '09. Was fortunate to get a gig right after I finished the NYU thing with a girl named Sophie Millman. So
Mhm,
that kind of kept me rolling for about a year and a half. She was in Canada, but touring all over the world. We went all through Canada and the States and Japan and Russia and all these places. It was really cool. She was kind of like a you know, kinda like a Diana Krall type singer, but she didn't play piano. She had
mhm.
this really nice, incredible voice. But the industry just wasn't for her. She wanted to be a mom and kinda like, you know, throw in her chips on the performing thing. Maybe she'll come back, who knows? She's very talented and had a following and such.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was tough, you know, because in New York, it's you come off the road from something like that and you just don't have, the ability to jump right into other gigs, you
Mhm.
know, so I had to take some teaching stuff that was kinda rough, and then just eventually kinda built myself back, to where I needed to be. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, shoot, man, I've been out here 19 years. I can't believe it.
yeah.
I still feel like the new guy. You
Oh
know?
wow. No, man. I think when you've been in a scene for like 10 plus years, you've kind of like,
Yeah,
you've established yourself. You've put in your fair share of dues and like you don't have
sure.
to think of yourself as a newbie at all.
Yeah, no, no. I do definitely. I mean, even though I live in Orange County, I feel part of the scene because I go to LA enough and I gig with those guys and they come down here. And it's funny right now, the scene, it's pretty shut down now, but up until a couple weeks ago, Orange County was the only place for live music down here. So there's like
That's
places
right.
near me and everyone's coming down here to play. It's kind of
That's
funny.
right.
But
Yeah, because LA County banned it, but Orange County didn't, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Orange County's got a lot of questionable people that think the whole thing is
Yeah.
bullshit, which it's not. But um, I, th- I'm torn because I talked to Bruce Foreman about this, and he's
Okay.
furious, and he thinks that LA is being way too harsh, which I kind of agree with him because they are allowing out. They up until recently they were allowing outdoor dining, and like some of the places that we've been playing down here are totally cool. Like it's outdoor dining and everything's spread out. The band is like way over there in the corner. I mean, it's pretty damn safe. And I'm like, why can't LA do more of this? And they just really, really shut down. And it's like, I don't know how much longer this is gonna last for. It's crazy.
Yeah. Man, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, my whole thing is like, well, I mean, if they're gonna shut everybody down, then maybe they don't have to make everybody pay all their taxes or their rent, or they can hook people up with some money,
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
people have to pay their bills somehow,
That's what I'm saying. And that's the thing that Bruce was saying, like, why can people go to dinner and sit there and waiters are walking around and everyone's sitting, but you can't have a group in the corner playing? Or, or you can go to Walmart and it's wall to wall people, but you can't have a band play in the corner. It's kind of
Yeah.
stupid if you think about it.
I think we
And
need some musician relief funding from the federal government, right?
yeah,
Or
no
from the
kidding, man.
state.
No kidding. So I don't know, man. We're musicians though. We'll survive, dude. It's like if we have to play like in a park or something like what they're doing in New York, that's what we do.
That's
So
right.
you know, so like now you're a father now, right? How old's you have a son, right?
I do, yeah.
How old's your
He
son?
he's a year and a half.
Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the greatest thing in my life. It's
Of course,
tremendous. And um the pandemic in some ways has been a bit of a blessing for that because
because you're home.
I've been able to spend way more time with them, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
After he was born, I hit the road like 2 weeks later, and I was just like going, because you're trying to provide, you're trying to like be Superman, super dad,
yeah,
and so I was really trying to take my career seriously and balance everything. And then the pandemic kind of hit, which changed everything. And yeah, the silver lining has been, yeah, I get to spend a bunch of time with him. Now I have a ton of work. I'm doing a ton of teaching and recording and all the podcasting stuff. And so fortunately, my week is pretty packed. So I don't get to spend as much time with him as I was like over the summer or like the
yeah,
end of the spring. But no, it's been the greatest thing, and it puts a new perspective on your playing, because you kind of have this thing that's like much, I don't know, much greater, much more important than anything in your life,
yeah,
occupying your headspace, occupying your soul, occupying everything.
yeah.
So you're playing. I don't know. For me, it just sort of became maybe a little bit more focused is the right word or
Mhm.
something. Um, and I remember hearing a lot of cats talk about this. Like Larry Koontz used to talk about this to me back in LA. Diorio would talk about this with me. Just hear it from a number of guys, and you kind of always wonder about it,
Mhm.
think about it and everything. And Yeah, I've certainly felt it. There's something to it. I mean, maybe it's just as simple as it matures you a little bit and, helps you grow up a little bit and that helps your playing. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I certainly think that as guitar players, we reflect our personalities. We like reflect the things about our life that make us who we are on our instrument.
Yeah.
So,
I think it just makes you play in a deeper way, I mean, our music is just a representation of our life, and
exactly.
if you're the kind of person that just spends 8 hours a day in a practice room, that's great because you're going to be a monster musician. But somebody who's out there living life and doing things like raising a kid is going to bring a depth to your music that I think you know, cannot be reached in any other way, I think. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think what we're getting at, and I agree, I think what we're getting at is like having something behind your playing,
Hmm.
having like experience behind your playing.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about playing experience, as I said. I'm talking about life experience.
Sure.
So whether that's being a dad, whether that's going through a lot, I think it's just you can tell when people have something to play about, whatever it
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
and to your point, practicing for 8 hours a day when you've had a charmed life isn't necessarily going to put you in that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might, you never know, but like, I think you can always hear when people have something to play about and they're well practiced.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be a balance of everything, but it's like, how all the great blues musicians were torture and the great jazz musicians, it's either torture and pain or extreme love or something like that. It's like there's something
Right.
there to it that makes your music more deep and more beautiful in a way, so
Yeah. Well, I think just the journey of being a jazz guitar player, really, no matter where you live, you're going to encounter hardship. You're going to encounter
yeah,
challenge. You're going to encounter resistance. You're going to just encounter these things that, sort of test your metal, and make you resilient. And
yeah,
those are important qualities as a jazz player, especially
yeah,
as like a guitar player.
yeah. I heard there was a quote. I think someone, like, it was like Francis Ford Coppola may have said this or something, but he basically said, like, you're not truly an adult until you raise a kid and you're responsible for somebody else. I don't know if
Mm,
that's true or not, but that was his outlook, was like, until you're in a situation where you're responsible for someone else's life and you would give your life for them without even a blink of an eye,
yeah.
that totally flips your existence in a way. Not saying that you need a kid to be an adult, that's ridiculous, but you know what I'm saying. It does something about your view of the world where you're like, oh, I don't really care about myself anymore. It's about this person now,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
I don't like to be too presumptuous, but I think it's the best thing in the world. I
Yeah.
would recommend it to people, but
Yeah.
it's not for everyone. So you
No.
kind of have to assess your own thing.
Yeah. It's definitely a job that if you don't want it, you shouldn't take it.
Yeah,
Because
I've met some people.
a lot of
I've
people
met
have
some.
taken it. And they shouldn't
Yeah,
have, right?
I've met some people that I'm like, I'm glad you haven't reproduced. That was a good decision.
It's great.
I don't say that to their face. I think that in
No,
my
you're just
head, and
thinking it.
then
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, thank God there's not more of you. I wanted to ask you. I see that you had studied with Schofield when you were in
Yeah.
school. Now I got to hear about that. Like, what was he like as a teacher? Because I mean, he's one
Oh,
of my all-time heroes. So
yeah. Yeah, me too. Inspiring.
yeah,
That's he's incredibly inspiring. He's the kind of teacher that you will learn from by hearing him and by experiencing his vibe and the way he is and his personality and the stories he tells, more so than you will learn from him by having him explain something to you in great detail. He's not that kind of teacher.
right.
His He figured out things so naturally,
Yeah,
and just from years and years of playing and practicing and experiencing that, he's not going to break something down for you like you might read in a book or like you might hear from like a really sort of established type of teacher. And that was okay because when I studied with him, this was, I was 25, 26.
Yeah,
I had kind of already gone through some fundamental things through
sure.
high school and college. So
You were ready for that.
ready. Yeah, I felt like that was a good way for me to learn. And he was so generous to me, generous with his time, encouraging, and just a wicked combination of a guy that's got, blues and he's sort of got like Albert King and Jimi Hendrix and Clapton. He sort of got that thing,
Yeah,
and then he's also got like Sonny Rollins and like Bird and Train and Cannonball,
yeah,
Coy. He's got that thing, and you
yeah,
don't hear a lot of people on guitar that really have that much together legitimately. You hear people that are more kind of coming from one side or the other. Not that there's only two sides, but you
yeah,
get sort of what I'm saying. So that was really inspiring, to hear someone that had that kind of a blend that was that deep in both of those bags.
yeah.
It was also interesting that there were certain things that he just didn't know about guitar. I think when you meet your heroes of guitar, you kind of assume that they just know everything,
Right.
that they're just like, they're, the great John Scofield, there's nothing he couldn't play.
Hmm.
No, I mean, there were plenty of things he didn't know how to play on the instrument, which I really surprised me. Like, one time I was playing like a samba pattern for him. He was like, "How do you do that?" I was so baffled. I was like, "What do you mean? How do I do? Like, this is so easy, right?" No, I never really figured that out, And
That
sight
can't
reading,
that can't be true because he
it
plays
was.
all kinds of rhythms. That's hard to believe that.
I know, and sight reading was never something that he was like that deep on. So, the lesson that I learned from him was that he kind of accepted and maybe honed his skills so much to the point that he wasn't worried about the things that he couldn't do. He was
Yeah,
more really concerned about the things that he was doing and the artist that he was becoming,
yeah,
and he's been in that zone for 30 or 40 years now.
yeah. I
So
mean,
that's an important lesson.
I can't think of. I know they're out there, but I can't think of any other jazz guitar player that can play straight ahead jazz as well as he can, but who's so great at playing funk guitar and groove and stuff
Exactly.
and blues. Because there's a lot of funk and blues guitar players that can play jazz, but nowhere close to Schofield. It's not even in the
No,
same ballpark,
no,
you know?
no. And yeah, I mean, he just had such an incredible career. He hit it at such a sweet time, and he was so talented. And that combination, I mean, it just put him in some incredible places. I mean, you can't practice the kind of experience that he gained playing with
Yeah,
Miles, playing with Jerry Mulligan, you know, the years he spent playing with Lovano and Kenny Garrett and doing his own bands. So he was
yeah,
a really important guy for me. He gave me some opportunities after that, which were really cool. Um, some professional opportunities that really helped me out. And he was gracious enough to be the first guest on our podcast, High Action.
yeah. I
So
want to
that was
mention
pretty
your
cool.
podcast actually, but go ahead, keep going.
No, it was just mainly those things. Is he's been a big supporter and always encouraging. And I remember um, playing some solo guitar stuff for him once, and he was just like, "Okay, cool, yeah, you got something to say." And that was enough for me because that's
Yeah.
really what it's about for Schofield. It's not about like what you're playing and how technical it is, or about like how many changes you made or anything like that. It's just about, do you have something to say on your instrument?
Hmm.
Is it coming from a good place, and is it gonna move me? And I
Hmm.
think for him, that's the thing. And when he hears somebody that has something behind their playing, something that they're really in touch with, it connects with him.
Hmm.
And that's how he approaches playing. That's why he always sounds so good.
Yeah.
Because there's so much behind what he's playing, and it's not BS. It's coming from a good place.
And he's so unique, man. That's why, like his generation, I always call him the big three. Him, Matheny, and Bill Frisell. Those. I mean, I've always loved the entire history of jazz guitar, and I pretty
Yeah,
much listened to and studied all the cats.
yeah.
But those are the guys that I relate most to because when I was in high school, those were the guys. There's a lot of younger players that I love and admire as well, but those guys are like my guys. You know what I'm saying? Like guys who are in their 20s now, they're probably into Kurt and Mike Moreno, and 20 years from now, those will be their guys because that's who they grew up on and so forth. But for me, like those are the guys, and what I love about them so much is that the three of them are so unbelievably different from each other. And I feel like I don't hear that as much today. Like when you hear a lot of some of the younger cats, I can hear this guy, this guy, this guy, you go, well, I kind of can tell the difference here and there. But if you play Schofield or Matheny, it's like, it's no question. You know what I mean?
Well, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I would add to that though, because I think a lot of people talk about those big three guys,
Yeah.
Frizzell, Schofield, and Matheny, and yes, they made such a huge impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the biggest fucking fan in the world of those three guys, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think though that there are other guys that don't get talked about enough, you know,
Sure.
that are kind of within that generation of people. Um, I put Bruce Foreman in that category, you know.
Yeah. Bruce is
I put Larry Koontz in that category. I
Yep.
put Bobby Broom in that category,
Sure.
you know. I think Peter Bernstein's a little younger, but
Yeah.
I'd put Bolenbach in that category. Paul
Yeah.
Bolenbach is just
Yeah.
out of sight, man, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
But I think those three guys were definitely the biggest influences, though, as far as like inspiring. Like when I was in high school, everybody sang
yeah,
like Matheny, like everybody. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like people like Bruce and like you're saying, they're all great players, but I think those three did have the biggest impact at that time as far as
Oh yeah.
like copycats or whatever you want to call it, inspiring people. Like how Kurt became after them. I think Kurt was like the next big guy.
And I think a big reason is just the entire package of their artistry as opposed to maybe just what you can hear in their guitar playing. Like it comes from the songs they're writing, it
Their
comes from the way
compositions.
yeah, it comes from the way they're marketing themselves. It comes from a certain aspect of just luck and timing
Mhm.
in the record industry, you
Yeah,
know, or with some of the gigs that they got. But certainly I acknowledge the big three as they're referred to in jazz
yeah,
guitar,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I always try to add to the discussion because there's just
There's a
there's a
lot of
lot
them.
of yeah, a lot of inspiring players in that generation and then following down to different generations like you've talked about.
Yeah.
I will say though, it will be pretty much impossible at this point. Maybe not impossible, but darn near impossible for a guitar player in this day and age to be able to like recreate what Matheny did.
I
I
know.
think even of the big three you're talking about,
Yeah.
Matheny kind of stands alone in terms of like market success and the kinds of touring he has done, and especially did back in the day. Um,
The
I
Matheny
mean
group.
that,
You
yeah,
know what I
it's just
mean?
I mean they're playing stadiums and stuff, you
Mhm.
know, and I don't know that the way that that industry used to operate with you know record sales driving promotion and radio and this sort of connection between those things and touring, now that's all flipped on its head, right? So
Yeah.
I don't really see anybody doing that now. I think it'll be done more with like social media or some sort of maybe podcasting, whatever it is. Like that's how people will reach their audiences more, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you would get into the Matheny or whatever as well. I will say this though. There's the big reason why I think one of the main reasons why Matheny was so successful with the Matheny group and all that is his music was unbelievably melodic. Like it's basically it was like pop music, you know. I mean, Last Train Home was a pop hit practically. I remember hearing it in like Publix commercials when I was a kid,
Right.
and I'm not when I was a kid, but college, whatever. And you know, a lot of the, a lot of younger, not younger, but seems like a lot of the jazz musicians that are working today are not in projects that I hear that are that melodic. You know what I'm saying? The music is kind of in a different place right now, where Matheny figured out a way to create this kind of melodic jazz that was as successful as smooth jazz, but was not smooth jazz. You know what I mean? It was much more artistic and honest to me than what smooth jazz was. But he figured out a way to create this kind of music that was as, I'm not going to call it commercial because he wasn't being commercial, but it was more broad. You know what I'm saying? And he
Yes.
figured out a way to do it, and that's so hard to do, and I don't know how to do it. I mean, but he figured out a way how to do it.
Yeah, well, I think it was a natural progression for him, like, and really a collaboration with Lyle Mays
Lyle, absolutely.
and the other members of his band that were very long standing.
Mhm.
Um, by the way, we forgot to mention certainly the big four is George Benson, you
Oh well,
know,
Benson, yeah,
and you know,
he's on a whole
yeah,
other level. He was an island.
lest we forget
Yeah,
the, probably the most amazing guitar player
he's
still
un,
alive today. I don't even
yeah.
know. Um,
But now he did some very, very commercial music that was definitely smooth jazz. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's amazing, but I'm saying what he did in the 80s, especially in the 70s, like
yeah.
Reason and stuff was kind of like a new thing, but the 80s was straight up pop smooth jazz. So there's that. He wasn't
Well,
doing like when Matheny was doing was a little different. You know what I mean?
yeah, but this is sort of the trend. I mean, you saw that with Wes too,
Yeah, yeah,
in the later areas of his career.
yeah,
Um, and again, I think it comes from this place of you're making albums and you're deciding projects that you're doing that are sort of directing your career,
yeah,
or maybe the performances that you're doing are sort of developing into an album. But again,
yeah.
you're working with a label that has an agenda. You're working
Mhm.
with producers that are in sync with that agenda.
Yeah,
And when that all kind of comes together with the artist's vision, um, you're getting this product that's being sold and being bought, and then that's getting on the radio in those local areas, and
mhm,
then you're performing in those local areas. So when you hear Pat talk about all this, he speaks about this, like, the importance of jazz radio and this sort of collaboration that he had between, like, where the record was being played a lot and where he was having his biggest gigs. And he'd go to these places and he'd have these interviews with folks, and they'd play at the theater for hundreds of people or more. They'd
yeah.
play at stadiums. And that sort of uh, you know, infrastructure just doesn't really exist now anymore.
You
So it's
just stole
really
the word out of my
hard.
mouth. I was going to say infrastructure, and there was a whole industry and an infrastructure, like you said, that, yeah, you're right. It's not there anymore. So, yeah, I don't know who the hell knows. I mean,
Well, there's opportunities to do a lot still, though. I mean,
sure.
social media has a lot of positive elements to it, and I think we're still kind of in the early days of understanding how to really integrate it successfully to our community, because the music community is just so important. And let's make the more specific to the guitar community.
Mhm,
We need to find ways to monetize all these
mhm,
things that we're able to do.
yeah.
Social media keeps asking it for free, which is fine, but
Mhm,
we need to find ways to kind of be able to monetize it, and people who can get a lot of followers can do that.
mhm.
But you know that can take a while.
Yeah, well, it's hard to get the public willing to pay for music, man. I mean,
Yeah,
I teach, a lot of students, and I teach these at community college. I teach some of these music appreciation classes and like history of American pop music. And every semester, man, I give my speech, because I tell them, I go, how many of you guys buy music? And like one person will raise their hand. And I'll tell them, I go, you guys got to really think about, what it's like being an artist. And these people are trying to make records, and they're not trying to be multimillionaire rock stars. They're just trying to pay their rent. They're trying to make a living.
yeah, yeah.
And I tell them, I go, you guys gotta buy music. You can't just expect everything to be free all the time. These people are just gonna stop making records because they're
A
gonna
hundred
be like, what's
percent,
the point? You know?
100% agree. And it's like, to let your listeners know, like, it's such a good feeling when I got that little email from Bandcamp comes in my box and it's like somebody purchased your album. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, that's so good.
yeah,
So, it definitely feels good to the artists. It probably feels good to the person who's buying the music
sure.
because they feel like they're supporting. So we just kind of need to get into that habit more because the streaming thing does not pay the bills at all, man.
No,
And
not at
so much
all.
goes into the music and sort of the streaming services, their concept is like, well, that maybe so much shouldn't go into the music. Like maybe you shouldn't make albums. Like just make, a single each month and just do that for the rest of your life. And you can do it all from home. It won't cost you anything. It's like that really changes the sound of the music, you know?
And well, when a don't get me started on that. Like when the head of Spotify said something like that, like, well, maybe musicians can't make records. And I'm thinking, who are you to make that decision? Like you're
Exactly.
making billions of dollars off of musicians, and
Exactly.
you're the one
Exactly.
telling the musicians that maybe they should deal with it. It's like, isn't that convenient for you to say that? It's like,
Exactly.
what? It's like,
Exactly.
you know,
I, it's a hard pill to accept if that is the future for our society and as musicians. I've heard from so many musicians that I respect that the pinnacle for them, like when you ask some of the greatest minds in music, people like Terrence Blanchard or Schofield, or I'll throw some other names, Kenny Werner out there, Ralph Alessi, when you ask some of these huge people about music and you say, what do you think is your pinnacle of success? It's like they want to make their version of Kind of Blue. Like that's what musicians we that's what we want. We want to
yeah,
make that storied album, you
right.
know. We want to make Smoking at the Half Note.
Mhm.
We want to make Jim Hall Trio Live. We want to make these legendary albums for Django. That's what you want as a guitar player. And to sort of take that away as a part of the artistic path or the artistic journey just seems really detrimental to the music itself, um,
Yeah,
and to guitar playing itself. So that's not something that I'm totally willing to accept. I'm still making albums, and I still intend to do that. We'll
yeah.
see how long that lasts, but I hope we can hold on to that concept as guitar players, as musicians, as jazz artists, and just whatever you do. Um, Not to say that you shouldn't do the social media thing. You should. I do that,
Gotta
for
do
sure.
everything now.
But the album is a special art. It really feels
Yeah.
like chapters in your book, as a musician. That's always how I felt as with it. So I encourage people to keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's like, especially with my students, like especially when I have serious jazz students, a lot of them, they do listen to music, but they're not listening to like a record over and over. And I tell them, I go, like they'll put on Pandora, Wes Montgomery station, and they are hearing a lot of good music. But I tell them, I go, it's not the same as listening to Smoking at the Half Note 50 times in a row. I'm like, you got to memorize every note on that record because it's that
Yeah.
great. The music is
Yeah.
that important that it deserves that. It demands that.
100, you're preaching to the choir, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I know the convenience of just, checking out whatever you can get on Apple Music or Amazon Music.
Yeah.
I use those too. I don't really use Spotify. It's too much
I
bad
dropped
mojo there.
Spotify. I dropped it.
Yeah, but certainly I'll check out music on Amazon Music, Apple Music, YouTube sometimes. It's all pretty much the same thing, but I just draw the line at Spotify. However, when I'm sitting down to like listen to something, it's vinyl usually. It's
Mhm.
vinyl or CD, but preferably vinyl because I want to look at the liner notes. I want to like hold the thing in my hand and I want to read a little bit about it. I want to make sure I know who's on the track. I want to like see where it was recorded. All these little details fascinate me
Yeah.
because when I listen to music, that's how I want to experience it.
What's
It's more
nice
than
is,
just
I'm sorry, vinyl's making a big comeback, like from to relation to what you're saying, and that's a great thing.
yeah. Absolutely. And vinyl sounds so much better. I mean, I know people say this, but it really is true. Like I can listen to vinyl all night, just keep
Mhm.
spinning albums.
Yeah.
3, 4 hours hanging out. With CDs, it's a little harder. And when I'm just like streaming something on my phone to check it out real quick, I can barely listen to like 10 or 15 minutes of something like that. It's
Yeah.
like the harshness that isn't
Yeah.
there with the vinyl. Like the vinyl has this warmth that doesn't tire my ear, you
Yeah.
know. I don't know what it is, but
Where do you have your record player? Do you have like a listening room, or do you have it in your living room, or how do you have
it's
your
kind
record?
of right here, down here in my studio. I've got it right next to me. I got some of my favorite records back there, and I don't always spin a ton of jazz stuff. I just sort of spin, whatever. Some
Anything.
things, yeah, things that make me nostalgic. Like I grew up in the Bay Area, so I always love listening to John Lee Hooker. He reminds me,
Yeah.
reminds me of San Francisco and reminds me of like places I used to go play. And so real folk blues, that's been on the turntable recently.
Yeah.
Just like the feel of John Lee Hooker and the soul and the sound of his voice. It's all just like that's the kind of stuff you want when you're approaching bebop too. That's the
Oh,
kind of stuff you want.
it's so raw and so honest, man.
Yeah.
I'm a blues freak, man. Like I jam the blues all the time. BB King, Freddie King, all the
Oh
older
yeah,
the
man.
better, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
And I take that music very seriously. I
Oh
love that
yeah.
music.
Oh
It
yeah,
makes you a
man.
better jazz player, man.
It just makes you a better human listening to
You're
that
right.
stuff.
It does. It does.
So yeah, I've always loved listening to that. So that's been on the turntable recently. I always find myself coming back to a little Creedence Clearwater Revival, Green River.
Nice.
That's been in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That's some pretty stanky stuff. Uh, God, what else? Trying to think. I have some good classical vinyl. My grandfather was an amateur cellist,
Oh,
and
okay.
so there's been a little bit of musical history in my family. My grandfather, amateur cellist. My dad was a folk guitar player. So there was always kind of this idea of good music around and vinyl, even when I
Yeah.
was a kid. Um, and when my grandfather passed, I was able to inherit all his vinyl, all his classical vinyl. It was mainly
Wow.
classical music. So I've got like around 80 to 90 like really amazing uh picks of like Chicago Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, Berlin Philharmonic, just like incredible classical picks by my
Oh man.
grandfather. One of them is the Ravel Quartet in F, and it's played by the Budapest String Quartet, and that one's been on repeat for a while.
I love
So
those. I used to love those string quartets from Ravel. I need to listen to more classical, man. Like I'm doing this music appreciation class, and every time I teach it, I'm like, I gotta listen to more classical. We'll do a
yeah.
certain piece. Like I was teaching Brahms the other day, and I was like, I think Brahms might be the most soulful classical composer I've ever heard. For
Oh man. Yeah.
so soulful. There's a sorrow in his music that's so
Yeah.
beautiful, man. That guy
Yeah,
was deep.
you can really improve your musicianship by going deep on that stuff for sure. And you talk about getting into other fields of guitar, just keeping that idea of melody in your mind, whether you're playing blues or jazz or funk or anything, you know, genres that can kind of get busy with guitar at
Mhm.
times, to keep that idea of just pure melody that can be so present in some of the great classical composers is pretty important, I think.
Yeah. And great songwriters, just listening to great songs, all those great
Yeah.
melodies, man. It's like it rubs off on you, makes you a better composer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
You
switching
know?
gears a little bit musically too, I've also been listening when I think about like some of my favorite songwriters, I mean, that goes pretty deep. Obviously, Joni Mitchell's at the top of the list,
Oh, me too, man.
Bob Dylan,
Mhm.
Bob Marley.
Uh,
But when I get into like more recent, um, I get into Jeff Buckley. Kind of always go back listening to him and
Unbelievable.
and Gary Clark Jr. I
Hmm.
think this
Yes.
guy is just slamming it right now, or
Yeah.
has been for maybe 10 years. But like, yeah, those are kind of where I find myself these days. You
Yeah.
know.
There's some great folk type songwriters around now. I mean, this is a great time. I mean, there's always a good time for music, but like I'm a
Mhm.
huge fan of Ray LaMontagne. You ever check him out?
Yes, I've heard of him. I haven't. been listening to his music. No, but now I will, because I'm always down to check out new stuff, you know?
He's fantastic, man. He's got a very soulful voice, writes great songs. The Milk Carton Kids are amazing.
Yes, like Milk
They're
Carton Kids for
amazing,
sure.
man.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been into them for a while.
Fleet Foxes, you check them out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was
Love them.
into them from a long time. I was into them kind of right when they came out, and yeah, I especially liked their second and third albums. There was a while between their, I think, fourth or fifth album that came out more recently, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, love that. It sort of reminds me of like a Beach Boys, Crosby, Stills and Nash kind of era of harmonizing and playing really good songs,
yeah,
with just catchy songwriting and like tight lyrics. And that guy Robin Pecknold can like he can really sing.
yeah,
So
yeah. There's
that
so
gets
much
it
good
done.
stuff, man. Yeah, like we're talking about the vinyl. Like I have a record player. I have like we have this guest room, and it's in there, and I never go in there because I have to like go into this other room, and there's just a bed, and I don't know, like it's hard. Like I remember when I was in high school, every night I would lay in bed and just put records on and just like listen to two, three records at a time. And that just doesn't happen anymore. With life gets so busy now. It's just so hard to do that. So I listen to music in the car or when I'm exercising, and of course
Yeah.
that's all going to be phone with ear pods. But I guess it's better
Yeah.
than nothing. But
Oh,
yeah,
it is. It absolutely is. But man, if you can find that space to just enjoy music like that, I've been able to find that space in my life, and it is really nice. It really is. Because that's kind of how we got in love with the guitar and in love with music, while was just kind of sitting down and experiencing it with our ears like that, and like holding on to a CD or holding on to a vinyl, cover that like it meant so much to us then. Like I
yeah,
remember when I got this one of the big guitar albums for me. And there's been a lot, but this is just like going back when I was real young. I can still remember the CD. I probably have it back here, but it was the tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan at the Austin City Limits with
mhm,
like all the greats. I think it was like Clapton and his brother Jimmy Vaughn and Bonnie Raitt was there, and Buddy Guy I think was part of it. It was just
mhm.
this incredible lineup at Austin City Limits, all playing for Stevie Ray Vaughan. I remember seeing the cover, the black and white cover, and holding it and listening to the songs, and was just like so into it. And I
Yeah,
think that experience, it means a lot. So I
yeah.
hope that people still gravitate towards it, because, like you said, when you're just streaming something and putting it on, and it's super convenient, and you're multitasking, it's like a different
It's
experience.
different, man. It's different. You almost have to make the time to do it. We have so many distractions now. I mean, I listen to podcasts a lot, which kills a lot of my time because I should be listening to music instead of a podcast. but
Well,
but
there are some good podcasts out there. I mean,
speaking of
uh,
yours, which I want to get to,
okay.
high action. Go. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What were you gonna say?
No, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I've been loving doing high action. It's
Yeah,
just so great getting into this zone with not only with John and Will. We've been in that zone for years, just
yeah,
touring like that. And we actually, it was our agent that said to us, "Hey, you guys should do a podcast." So it's been a fortunate thing for us. We've loved to kind of see the response from the audience, and also to just kind of connect with these players that we've gotten to know in a deeper context.
yeah,
But prior to that, I was just getting way into certain podcasts that I thought like really informed um, me as a musician as well. And one of them was Chick Corea has a really great podcast,
Oh, I didn't know
and
that.
I don't think he does it anymore. And he started it back in like 2014 or 15. I mean,
Hmm,
people have been podcasting for like
been a
10 or
while.
15 years in some cases.
Yeah.
I remember in LA, a friend of mine had a podcast, like this was like 2007, and I was like, podcast, like who the fuck cares about a podcast?
Yeah.
But some people have been doing it for a while. So Chick had one back in 2014, 15, and he's interviewing like Bella Fleck. That's an amazing one. He's interviewing
Wow.
Herbie Hancock. That's a really amazing one.
Wow.
and a couple others. I mean, especially the one with those two, I can remember being like just beyond fascinating to listen to Chick talk with Bella about music, Chick talk to Herbie about playing. I mean, it was just like, so I knew that there was something that we could be doing as guitar players that could get us into that or close to that zone.
Yeah.
And there's certainly become some really good guitar podcasts out there. I haven't listened to a ton of them, but I know True Fire has one as well, and I know there's one called Everybody Loves Guitar that Bobby Broom was telling me about. So I got to go check out his episode of that one too. You know.
Well, for those of you listeners out there who haven't heard Perry's podcast, High Action, it's with the New West Guitar Groups. That's their podcast, and it's really good. I've been listening to every episode,
Oh man,
and
thank you.
it's way more professional than mine. Everyone's got, you know, mics, and there's like there's edits and cuts, and then there's like musical examples that are played, and they'll ask the artist about, you know, anything related to their music and their life, but they'll play some music and talk about it. But you know, you guys do a really good job. I mean, I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and your guys is definitely one of my top favorite ones right now. So
Oh
congrats on
man,
that.
thank you so much. That means so much coming from you, man, because I know you're a cat that really understands this instrument and understands the music, and you know, that's sort of who we're trying to reach, are just the people that are not only great players like yourself, but are people that are just really interested in the guitar. And I think there's
Yeah,
a lot of people out there. The
yeah,
guitar market is still a big place,
yeah, it is.
and a lot of people love this instrument. And even though the three of us on High Action are like, within the realm of jazz, maybe in some different ways, we were trying to highlight guitar players really of any genre,
Yeah,
and luthiers as well, and just really trying to reach out to a diverse group of people and kind of get this discussion started about their careers and about how they got started. It's always something that I find fascinating, is like how people got introduced to this path in life. I
yeah.
always find that fascinating.
Well, that's what, that's what made me want to start this one, was a few that I listened to. Like, I like Joe Rogan, and he'll have like, it's just a hang,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Guitar Wank is fun with Foreman. Like,
Oh, of course, Guitar Wank. Yeah.
yeah, that one inspired me the most, because a lot of them, they get drunk and they're talking shit, and everything's like
Yeah.
really fun and funny. And I was like, that's something that I could do, because like for what
Yeah.
you guys do such a good job, but I'm way too lazy to do it that professional. so,
No, no,
so
no,
I was
no.
like, I just want to do one where it's like we just have fun and we can joke around. And like, I had Waddell on here, and we were totally goofing around. But
Nice.
and the first one, do you know Alex Sadnick? Do you know this? He's a sax player in town. Do you know him?
I don't think so. And he's in LA?
Yeah, yeah, he's a really good guy. He did one years ago, like when I didn't even know what a podcast was, and he did one. It was
Okay.
called Break the Mold, and it was all local LA jazz musicians. And he
Okay.
actually interviewed me once, which was very nice. And I remember, like, I listened to all of them because it was so cool. Because like, I was listening to podcasts of people that I gigged with, but like someone like you, we would do a gig together, but I don't know your whole life story. We're just hanging out at a
Right.
gig and talking crap or whatever. But then
Right.
I get to hear someone's whole life story and go, oh, I didn't know so and so lived there or did this or whatever. And it was he it stopped years and years and years ago. But what's nice about that is I hope he puts it out again. But it's a snapshot in time. Like, this is the LA jazz scene in 2005 or whatever it was.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And then I thought, well, no one's done one of all the guitar players in LA. Like break the I mean Guitar Wank, they have national people. You guys have national people. And I was like, but there's so many great guitar players in LA that people don't know about, like
Yeah.
Will and John and all these other guys. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that. And I got Kuntz and I got Bruce, and I do want to do people not from LA. Like, if I can get anybody, like if I can get, Kreisberg or Peter Bernstein or whoever, I would do them. I would have them on in a heartbeat, because I think even if you're in the LA scene, who the hell doesn't want to hear from Peter Bernstein, even though he's already done a lot of other podcasts, but still,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing. I mean, and a cat like him, he certainly spent time in LA playing a lot, so he knows a lot of people in that scene.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do. I mean, especially now that we're all kind of quarantined in our houses more or less, in our
Yeah.
places, and we can't kind of get out and socialize with each other like we used to. It does present a bit of an opportunity, to kind of get a podcast off the ground.
Yeah.
I've felt like during this pandemic, that's sort of been a silver lining for me too, is the podcast. Also, I've felt like people are just more into the YouTube videos and more into the Instagram stuff, and I think that's how people are staying connected. So we have to just be able to roll with the changes that society throws us. I mean,
Mhm.
one phrase that I've heard a lot as a jazz musician and as a jazz guitar player, I think it's true for any guitar player, is uh, this notion of improvise, adapt, and overcome. And you
Did
kind of
Foreman come up with that? He's
Foreman didn't come up with it, but he says it a lot.
he
I
preaches it a lot.
it's the saying in the Marines,
Oh,
oddly
that's
enough.
right. That's right. It's from the
And
Marines.
And yeah, Foreman did tell me this years ago. I studied with Bruce a little bit when I was like in high school coming up, and I've always idolized him, and
Yeah.
he knows that.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's a part of it. We still have to figure out a way to kind of continue to meet the challenges of this era. And I think a podcast is a great way to do that, for
Yeah.
people like yourself that are like inclined and able enough to do it. And yeah, you can reach people and you can make a difference. And you can, grow yourself as a musician too. I mean, I can't tell you how incredible it's been for me just to sit around and listen to these interviews on High Action, because the way we work is that one guy in the group will kind of lead an interview, and then the other two guys will kind of chime in towards the end and stuff.
Right.
Uh, so whether I'm leading an interview or whether I'm kind of like hanging back and chiming in toward the end, it's so informative, just getting to like talk to different guitar players and get their understanding about their approach and their sound and kind of where they're trying to take their instrument. And yeah, it's been really, really good for my own musicianship.
It's fascinating. I mean, and every interview that I do is always different, which is good. But sometimes I'll like the interview goes where it goes.
Hmm.
I probably there's 20 things I would have liked to have asked you, but we can't be here for 3 hours or whatever. But there's been some where I'll pick someone's brain on like how do you do composition and how do you do this or what did you practice, and I just love all that stuff because I'm
I can give you some
constantly
rapid fire answers if you need.
I didn't even ask you about your whole childhood, like growing up and all that, but that could take a long time. I kind of want to ask you about all those guitars I see. Because I'm a
Yeah.
major gearhead. So like, what's up? What do you got back there?
So I recently decided to take him out of the case. John Story convinced me because he got this guitar rack from DSR
Hmm.
and it looks so killing all the time. And I was like, I got to do that. So first one you see is my ES 175, my
That's your main
Gibson.
one that I always see you with.
Yeah, that's the here, I'll grab it. Bro.
Yeah, because I want to ask you about that guitar because that's like your number one, I think, right? What
Yeah,
what
this
year
is
is
my
that?
number one. This is 98. It's
Mhm.
not like too new or anything, but this is
Sounds good.
my main guitar.
Sounds beautiful, man.
Yeah, I love this thing. It's for me this is like the ticket home, this guitar right here. And then one sec. Then I got a 335, which is a
Uh-huh.
78, which I recently got, like recently. I guess it's been a year and a half now.
Hmm.
And that's been a great guitar. That's what I use this band I play with called No Biggity, the thing where I play um, covers from the 90s. That's the main guitar I use.
Yeah. If it's a
And
louder group, a 335 is perfect for that.
yeah, it just feels better to be more funky on it. And I've had some gigs where I've needed it, so it's been a good guitar. Then I have a Gibson Victory, so three Gibsons. That's a solid body.
Mhm.
I'll show you this one real quick.
Victory. That's interesting.
It's sort of a
Whoa.
rare solid body. Um,
That looks
and I
like
got
an
it
80s thing.
80s for sure. Yeah, it's got the uh, split between the single coil and humbucker pickups. It's got a boost in there. It's a heavy axe, but it's awesome. And I got it for a really great rate from a guitar collector in LA many years ago. So I got this one, and then I got an acoustic steel string from Jeff Traugott. Beautiful guitar. He's been a guy that has endorsed New West for a long time. And last February, right before the pandemic, I was in California visiting my folks, went down and saw him in Santa Cruz. And he was like, "Man, it's about time you get one of these guitars. Like, it's been 15 years. Like, when are you going to get one?" And so we made a little deal, and he hooked me up with one of his guitars. And uh, after that, I got a Takamine Hirarde, which is like a really nice nylon string guitar. Not concert nice, but it's
Yeah.
good enough for a guy that is going to use nylon string at live shows and like different jazz or
Electric.
commercial recordings and stuff.
Mhm.
And I studied classical enough to where I have a decent understanding of how to play, like a Bach prelude or cello suite on that guitar.
Mhm.
And then after that, I have a D'Angelico reissue. It's a Japanese-made D'Angelico reissue from 2001. That's more of like an acoustic archtop vibe.
Those
Let
are
me put this
good.
guitar down real quick. So yeah, that's sort of the arsenal, and mainly I use the 175, which is kind of like how I've tried to establish my sound.
Mhm.
But regularly I use all these instruments. I have an old kind of beater acoustic that I
Mhm.
use for teaching a lot, but I was using them a lot for recordings for different gigs around town pre-pandemic, so they haven't got as much use. Well, actually, I've been pretty much using all of them during the pandemic, except for the solid body and the D'Angelico. But
Yeah.
other than that, they've been getting some good recording use.
And when I was listening to some of your live record, that live in Brooklyn album the other
Oh
day. It
yeah,
was really great.
yeah.
And I like that your sound is very dry. Like you're not using any effects, which is kind of refreshing because a lot nowadays it seems like everyone's got mountains of delay and all this crap. And that's cool too. I like that too. But it was nice to hear just like a dry. I don't even think I heard much reverb. Were you playing through your Hendrickson on that record?
No, I was playing through another amp that I have called a Bell Duovox, which actually is a 15-inch speaker.
Uh,
And it was an old amp from the 80s that was intended to be like a guitar and accordion amp, kind of like a super polytone.
oh wow.
And the same guy that I bought that Gibson Victory from sold me that Bell Duovox, and it has a cool tone. It has like a good, thick, mid-rangey kind of tone,
Yeah.
and I found that I could get a cool sound with that. Um, but yeah, that album, Live in Brooklyn, was recorded. I had just switched to a wooden bridge on my 175, which I'm pretty sure wooden bridge for that recording. And I'd put 13s on the top, which is what I still do
Woo,
now.
look
So
at that.
for me, it's just more helpful to have that resistance on the top string to kind of help me swing a little bit more the
Mhm.
way I want.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I've stuck to it. It was sort of weird at first. I felt like, a little bit of tension in the hand that I wasn't used to with a
Yeah.
heavier string like that.
Yeah.
But then you just get used to it, and then the tone and the touch and the resistance feels right. At
Yeah.
least that was for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I admire that you kind of stick with one guitar because this has always been like a thing for me because like I'm a gear guy and I have a bunch of guitars and I'm at the point now where like I'm always wanting more guitars because that's just how I am. But I'll buy and
Yeah.
sell, so I'm not a hoarder. Like
Yeah.
I just sold two and I was gonna
Okay.
buy a 335 because I play Collings guitars. Those are my favorite guitars in the world. I got
Okay.
this beautiful arch top here that I play a lot. It's kind of like
Nice.
175-ish, because it's laminate
Hmm.
woods. It plays, it's so comfortable. It's a little thinner than a 175, which I like. It's because I had a 59 reissue 175 that was really great, but the it was a little too hollow for me. Like it was a little uncomfortable, like where
Hmm.
this is like just right and it plays and sounds amazing. But my main guitars are like semi-hollows. I'm a semi-hollow guy. So I have these
Yeah.
two 335 type guitars and they're a little different than a Gibson. So I was like, I should just have a Gibson too, just for like another flavor. And I'm like, I can't do it. I'm like, I'm already like kind of going around with like 3 or 4 different guitars, and I'm thinking I can't add another. It's weird. Like I'm like, I don't want another guitar in there because I feel like I'm never really settling on one. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird like that.
I do know what you mean, but again, it's a very personal thing,
Yeah,
like you have to kind of find that guitar that really speaks to you and that guitar that you connect with.
yeah,
And what I would also add to that, it's been my experience that it takes a long time to really understand how to play an instrument. At
yeah,
least it did for me with this 175.
yeah.
And so there's something about the way I play and my understanding of that particular guitar that are related.
Yeah.
So if you're switching guitars all the time, I think it's harder to make that connection.
I
So,
agree with you. It's weird though because there's a flip side though because I actually play a little different on each one, and I kind
mhm,
of like that. And I saw an interview with Frizzell, and he's a freak over guitars. Like every time I see him,
yeah,
he get a different guitar, and
yeah,
he actually says he likes doing that because every time he picks up a guitar, it feels fresh because I'm going to play differently. But he always sounds like him. It doesn't matter what guitar he plays. It doesn't have, you know what I mean? It's always Frizzell. But to
yeah.
him,
Well,
it feels different, which he likes.
and I get that, but don't you think that he's established himself as a telly player? I mean, don't you think that the
Sure.
Frizzell sound is that sound? It's kind of like Matheny on the Ibanez, like
Right.
you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's weird though because Frizzell lately has been playing. He has a Collings with humbuckers. He's been playing that a lot lately. And then
I
I saw
know,
him. He just did a concert, and now he has a 335, which I've never seen him play a 335.
I know, and I've been seeing him play different guitars as of late.
Yeah,
And I mean, look, I'm all for it. Like,
yeah.
but I think in deep in my heart, I just like
Telly
I
guy.
want to hear him play that telly,
Yeah,
and I want to hear him play like yeah, I just want to hear him play like Moon River on that telly, and that's it for me.
yeah.
He's oh man, he's one of my favorites in the world.
Me too, man.
Thinking back to this concert of his I saw at Symphony Space in New York, even before I moved to New York. It's just yeah, such great memories. I've seen him at the Vanguard with Paul Motion
Me
and
too.
Joe Lovano. I mean, that was an incredible concert
Oh,
to see. So yeah,
the last time I saw him was right before the pandemic, and
okay.
I've seen him like 30 times. I'm not kidding. Like
Oh,
every
killing it.
single time he comes to LA, I've seen him. I've seen him at the Vanguard with the Paul Motion Trio. The last time I was in New York, I saw him playing solo guitar, the music of John Zorn. I mean, I've seen him
Nice.
do every kind of imaginable group that he's had because I've been a fan since high school. And the
Yeah.
last time I saw him might have been one of the top three. He was playing duo with Julian Lage.
Oh yeah, that might have been must have been real good.
It was, sometimes you get these superstar duos, they're fine, but they're not really connecting in any way. It's
Mm.
just hearing two great players. They were so interconnected, man. It was like they were reading each other's minds. It was just freakishly good, man. I mean, I was
Yeah,
just shocked at how great it was. I wasn't
not
that shocked
surprised.
because they're both so great, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just like,
No,
oh
that's a really good pairing, those two.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable, man. I mean, Julian is he's one of my top favorite guitar players in the younger generation right now. He's
Oh
so
yeah.
great,
Oh yeah.
know. The way he infuses folk, and bluegrass into I don't even know if I mean you definitely could call it jazz, but you know what I'm saying. He's just got his own thing going on, and when he plays
Yeah, it's
trio, it's just killing.
yeah, he's tremendous. Really inspiring player, and he's been doing it since he was a kid too, which is even more amazing.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, he's sort of in this category all to his own. He hasn't really had a lot of the same experiences or trajectory of cats that came up working and things like that. Um,
yeah,
so I don't really see him on the scene the way I see other people and get
yeah.
to know other people, which is sort of different. But certainly every time I hear him play, I'm just like, really impressed.
Yeah, he kind of has his own vocabulary, like because I don't really hear bebop in his playing, although I know that he has studied it and he knows the language, but he doesn't play the standard like vocabulary that most of us play. Like we're all inspired by Bird and we've all transcribed a ton, and a lot of us have a similar kind of vocabulary where he doesn't have that, but he can play over anything, like any standard whatever he can kill on it. He's going to play his own thing over it, which is even more impressive in a way.
Yeah, well, that's how I feel about, you know, pretty much any guitar player that I feel has like truly realized their potential,
Mhm.
or is realizing their potential,
Yeah,
continuing to realize their potential.
yeah.
I think that's the ultimate, is getting to that place where you're just comfortable being yourself no matter what you're playing.
Frizzell's
And
like that.
a lot of people, I mean, not a lot of
Yeah,
people, but like
yeah,
a number of people are like that. I mean, we
yeah,
could rattle off the list,
yeah,
but
yeah,
um, I remember many years ago, still living in LA, speaking of Frizzell, I went to UCLA. Being a USC student, I went to UCLA
yeah.
for a master class that Frizzell was doing.
Wow.
And I knew Kenny Burrell, and he was kind enough to be like, "Yeah, just come on in," because he knew. He's like, "Didn't It's Bill Frisell." He knew that it didn't matter that I went to SC. Just come on
Yeah,
in. And
yeah.
there weren't a lot of people there. It was like maybe
Wow.
20 people in this master class at UCLA. And the way that Kenny introduced him was he said like, here's a guy that really has his own way of playing. And to me, that's the ultimate goal as a guitar player, is to just find your own voice. So this is me, 18, whatever, 19, hearing this idea of how to be a player from Kenny Burrell,
Yeah,
the
one of the
great,
masters of all time who I love.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Again, a guy that's in that level of who we're talking about, Matheny and Sco and Benson and he's right there. If
absolutely.
if not, beyond them.
Yeah,
Um, so hearing that from him, and then seeing the way that Frizzell responded to that, very humbled and just very glad to be there and just played so beautifully. Really early on in my development, I realized that is the goal. The
yeah.
goal is to just kind of become your own version of who these people are. It's not to imitate Wes. It's not to imitate Benson or Matheny or whatever. You go through those phases, but
Mhm.
ultimately you're trying to create your version of what those guys are. And
Yeah,
yeah, that's what all these great players do. So when you hear someone like Julian playing his own way in a lot of different aspects, I think that's because he's realizing his potential as an artist.
it's such a gift, man, because like we all do sound like ourselves, at least most of us do, and we all want that. But man, when you hear someone like that or Rosenwinkel, who they have this vision where it's like this fully realized way of playing, and it's such a like Matheny, man, his sound on Bright Side's Life was so unique and so different, and it was fully realized. I mean, he's 10 times better now than he was then, but still, he had it like right then. You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, it's so it's so rare to have it so young like that. You know what I mean? It's just wow, it's just amazing. I mean, I'm working on myself too, but it's like I feel like, I still haven't gotten there yet. I'm working on it, but these guys that get
Well,
it at such a young age, it's like, holy crap, man.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And everybody goes through different phases of their career, and people's playing changes.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I was just listening to a clip of myself when I came back today. I was listening to a clip from like 11 years ago, right when I first moved to New York at the Blue Note,
Hmm.
hearing myself play over this thing. I was like, wow, man, that was a while ago. And like some
Yeah.
of it I really like, and some of it I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't do that these days. So I think that's just sort of the natural progression that people go through
Yeah.
is they develop like every decade into some different areas of their
Sure.
playing. Um, I know what you mean about Matheny though, hearing him on Bright Side's Life and then like hearing him now. It's like it's the same guitar player. You can hear those same characteristics, but
Hmm.
there's a lot that's changed.
Yeah.
And that's almost how it should be. Like
Sure.
you
Yeah.
want to have your own way of playing, but you don't want to be the same player for 50 years.
No, of course not.
Like
And
you
some
want to
people
have an
do that.
arc. Yeah, you want to have an arc to your career. You want to feel like you've uh, gone somewhere on a
Yeah.
journey as an artist, as a guitar player.
Yeah. It's something that it took me a while to realize because when I was younger and in college and there were all these because growing up in South Florida it was all the best players went to the University of Miami. And
Yeah,
at that time, we probably should wrap it up soon. I'm sorry I'm keeping you too long, man,
that's
but
all
at,
right.
at that time, you know there were all these really really polished players that sounded like Matheny,
Right.
and for a while I was like, oh, I don't sound like these guys, and why don't I sound like that? I kind of wanted to have that sound, and then I soon realized I'm like, no, man, you're lucky that you don't sound like that because you kind of whatever you're doing, it may be not as good or whatever, less polished, but it's you. Like, I'll hear myself in a recording now, or even then, I'm like, that's me. Like, I can hear myself pretty easily. I may not like some of the stuff I'm playing, and I'm not, maybe I wish I played better at that time, but I do hear like that's me. And then I realized later, I'm like, okay, that's a good thing. And stick with that. Like, stick with what makes you, you, whatever it is.
I agree completely. And I think it's one of the hardest things to actually execute on the guitar is
Hmm.
that concept. The ironic thing is we have that ability to sound like that pretty much from the jump of
Right.
our career as guitar
You have to
players.
embrace it.
Yeah, and you're kind of negotiating this aspect of playing like yourself, playing what you understand, playing what you're comfortable, playing what you're hearing, and trying to expand your skills. You're kind of always caught in a negotiation between those two. Mm.
Yes.
And that's oftentimes what makes people sound not like themselves or makes them sound like not so good because they're reaching for something that's not quite there. So it's not always a bad thing because if nobody ever reached for something, then how would they really get any better? So sometimes it takes time to kind of like bring all that together. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
And if you can focus on the right stuff though, which is that ultimately you want to play your own way and you want to take the time and the energy to understand what that is.
Hmm.
Um, then you will come out sounding good.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of guitar players have the ability to sound really good. They just make musical choices on their instrument that muddy the water, or clutter up the idea or make it more difficult than they have to.
Yeah.
Um, I remember meeting Matheny many years ago, and one of the messages that I kind of got from him was that like there's still so much to understand in the simplicity of playing a great melody and just playing something right in time. And you can hear his playing and think of it as really complex, and it is, but he doesn't play the most complex stuff all the time. like you were
Especially
talking
the
about
records.
earlier. Yeah, like you're talking about earlier, his playing is really melodic in a lot of
Mhm.
ways,
Yeah.
and melody is often something that's overlooked as guitar players,
Mhm.
and I think, again, it's just about negotiating that balance between, like, if you're gonna play something that's technical, you gotta have it together 150%. You gotta have it
Mhm.
together 200% if you want it to have the same impact as playing something that's, like, beautiful and melodic and right in the pocket, you know?
Yeah. The challenge for someone like my age, how old are you? In your early 30s or
I'm 37.
oh, 37. Oh, you look good, man. I'm I'm almost 49 soon, and it's weird like for how long I've been playing, for a long time I was in the young generation, the up and coming guys.
Mm,
But now there's another generation, so like I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle, and I play the way that I play and I know the things that I know. But what's can be confusing is the younger generation, they're playing in this new way with all this new vocabulary. And a lot of it I don't know and I don't really understand. So part
hmm.
of me is like, you have to learn all of that. But then the other part of me is like, you can't just keep doing that forever because then there'll be another one, then another one. And you kind of have your style. Like for instance, someone like Bobby Broom, who you recently, Bobby
Oh, yeah.
Broom has his vocabulary of what he does, but he's not playing the same way that a 22-year-old is playing right now. It's totally different. You know what I mean? And that's okay. So part of me is like, does Bobby Broom have to learn all of this new stuff, or can he just be Bobby Broom? And that's like an interesting thing to think about because that's kind of like where I'm at. Like, I don't know what this stuff is over here, but I kind of like where I'm at right here. So what do you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, I remember asking Schofield about this,
Mhm.
sort of this idea of sounding like yourself, and this
Yeah.
notion that he would always say, like, you can't help but sound like yourself, so you might as well embrace it.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I kind of remember asking him about that and like how he got to a place where he could do that. And literally the first thing he said to me was, "Well, I guess the way I do that is first I think about the things I can't do." And so he's sort of aware of the stuff you're talking about, like, "Oh, I can't play like that guy, or I can't play like that guy."
Yeah.
But he's okay with that. He's not
Yeah.
trying to do that. And so I
Yeah.
think it's about just sort of letting go of this notion that you have to know everything about guitar.
Yeah.
You don't,
You can't.
and
Yeah.
nobody does.
Yeah.
Because you might hear somebody who's 22 years old that's playing something technically that you're like, whoa, crazy. Chances are they don't have the feel behind what they're playing that you hear in someone like Bobby Broom.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, it's just a matter, or Peter Bernstein or someone.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you're looking at the music.
Yeah.
Oftentimes technique can outshadow feel, but
Oh yeah.
I think somebody, especially in jazz, somebody who's playing with like a true honest feel and a tone, something that is like deep, that to me speaks volumes.
Yeah.
No pun
Yeah.
intended.
And,
um,
and
because it's not that easy to practice that.
yeah.
It's not that easy to work that out. It's like that's inside you from years of experience and years of playing. Now,
Yeah.
if you combine that with technique, and sophistication, then you're starting to get into maybe the pantheon of some of the great guitar players of all time, right? But
Yeah.
you know that's what it's about. Like, you don't have to be able to do everything, and none of these guys that we're talking about are able to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of what I was talking about earlier about Schofield, like understanding the fact that he couldn't really play a samba groove and was asking me how to do that. It's like these guys have accepted the things that they can't do, and they've just
Yeah.
really honed the things that they can do. And that's certainly where I'm at as a player. For a lot of years, I was pulled in different directions, trying to make a living as a guitar player and doing different things while still really pursuing jazz. And I'd say in the last, I don't know, I guess my whole life, but certainly in the last like 5 to 6 years, I've really just tried to hone into like the way I want to play and approach improvising on this Gibson ES-175 and really hone my thing
Yeah.
and not be too concerned about like everything else that's going on around me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
check it out and I learn from it and I keep improving my skills, and I believe in regular practicing and routine and all these things that I do. But ultimately it's about honing your style.
Yeah. I agree, man. Well, hey, man, I don't want to keep you all night. I know you got a baby to deal with and a family and everything.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much for being a part of this. It was a nice long talk and long hang. It was really fun.
Man, thank you so much. It's my favorite thing to discuss, jazz guitar, as you know, guitar in general.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you having me on this. I think it's so great you're doing a podcast. You've always been the sweetest guy to me,
Oh,
killer
thank you.
player.
You're a great
So
player. I mean, with those gigs we did earlier on, I mean, you were great back then, and you're even better now. So, we're all trying to get better.
that's the idea, my man. That's the idea.
So
Yeah,
for those of you who want to check out Perry's music, what's your website for your personal music?
PerrySmithMusic.com.
Okay, and then we have the new West Guitar Group, and we have High Action Podcast. So those are some really cool things. You should check out some of their recordings. You have a lot of videos on YouTube between you and the group, so there's plenty
Mm-hmm.
to check out for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And cool, man. Well, thank you so much. This is December 23rd, so I'm going to say Merry Christmas. And
Yeah.
I don't know when you're going to come to LA, or next time I come to New York, we should try to hook up, man, because
Oh yeah, I would love that.
fun.
Let's just hope it's sooner than later.
Yeah,
There's some gigs booked for me out in SoCal in April, but I don't know that it's gonna go down. So
yeah.
we'll see when we get through all this craziness.
Well, let me know, man. I've been going out of my way to hear live music. If it's happening, like I've been going, if it's safe. Like some of the places
Yeah.
down here that I've been telling you about, like I've been going out because it's pretty, you can sit like 10 feet away from somebody outside. So, and it's been a lifesaver to
I'm
me, man. I'm like,
I'm
oh,
envious.
yeah,
Envious of LA. I mean, I know the Rona is pretty bad out there right
it's
now, but
terrible right now.
um at least you guys have a climate where you can do outdoor gigs in a reasonable way that we're sort of not doing that right now. I mean, some guys are still playing like, saxophone, drums, keyboard, whatever kinds of gigs, but to play guitar in like 30 degrees, it ain't happening.
No, man, I can't play when it's 60 degrees outside. All right, brother. So have a good holiday and
Yeah.
stay safe, and we'll see you around. Thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, man. All right. Rock and roll. See
All
you
right,
later,
buddy.
man.
Bye bye.